So you're into game design, but maybe feeling a little disillusioned with how many games feel kind of throwaway.
Yeah, I get that.
We hear you.
For sure.
In this deep dive, we're going to explore that. Those criticisms from the game designer Reactorcore.
Oh, yeah, they're interesting.
They argue that this throwaway mentality is actually holding back what games could really be.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at an article they shared on Patreon called Throwaway Games Are a Band-Aid Approach.
Okay.
Whether you're a hardcore gamer or just, fascinated by how games get made, I think you'll find this interesting. Like how games are made and what the future of gaming could actually look like.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating is, Reactorcore isn't just like complaining. They've played like thousands of games.
Right.
Across all sorts of platforms.
Decades.
Yeah, like decades. So, I mean, their perspective is really informed.
So let's unpack their main argument. What do they actually mean by this term, throwaway games?
So essentially, they're saying that a lot of games just lack depth. They don't really engage you for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And they've played so many games, they can often predict the problems a new game is going to have just from watching a few seconds of footage.
Oh, wow.
And they say this approach to making games, it limits the potential of games as an art form.
Right.
And I think it even contributes to the negative view that some people have of gaming as a whole.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I can see how someone who mostly plays those kinds of games might be viewed as, I don't know, wasting time.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that way after finishing a game?
Definitely. Sometimes even when I've really enjoyed a game, I'm left with this feeling of, that was fun, but it's over now.
Yeah.
It was just a fleeting experience.
Yeah.
Almost a little empty.
So Reactorcore uses this really interesting analogy to describe why this happens. They talk about a movie mindset.
Yeah.
What do they mean?
So they argue that developers are often approaching games like they're making a movie, focusing on pre-scripted experiences instead of giving players real freedom.
So they're kind of stifling what makes games unique.
Yeah, exactly. The interactivity, the exploration, what they call emergent gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they say games end up feeling predictable and they fail to really tap into the player's natural curiosity.
So it's almost like developers are scared to let go of control.
Yeah, that's exactly Reactorcore's point.
Mm-hmm.
They're arguing for a different way to make games, a way that embraces this emergent gameplay that we were talking about.
So what would that look like in practice?
Well, let's say you're designing a desert environment for your game.
Right.
The traditional approach would be to, meticulously design every single element,
right.
Every cactus, every dune.
Mm-hmm.
But Reactorcore suggests a different approach. Instead of designing all the individual elements, you think about the underlying systems that create a desert. What are the conditions that allow plants to grow in a desert? What kind of creatures would live there,
Yeah.
You build the systems.
Okay.
And then you let the desert emerge organically.
That's really interesting.
A totally different way of thinking about game design.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Reactorcore calls this framework-driven design, right?
That's right. Instead of crafting every single detail, developers would create these flexible systems that can generate endless variations.
That's a cool idea.
You sprinkle in a bit of randomness and then you program in these if-else statements.
Right.
And, you can create all sorts of unexpected results and fascinating gameplay.
So instead of giving you a pre-made sandwich, they're giving you the ingredients and saying, go make your own.
Exactly. And that leads to a much more satisfying experience for the player. Instead of just following a path, you're encouraged to explore, experiment, see what you can discover.
Yeah.
It taps into our natural curiosity.
It makes sense that would be more engaging than just a quick thrill,
Yeah.
But can you apply this to all types of games?
Well, Reactorcore believes so.
Okay.
They think that eventually these small throwaway games will just become obsolete as these larger, more expansive games that offer greater value, games that you want to play for a long time, as those become the norm.
Yeah. It'll
just make more sense from a resource standpoint to make those kinds of games. And it's interesting to think about what that shift might look like,
Yeah.
Reactorcore argues that these throwaway games, they don't encourage players to really master any skills.
Right.
Because the skills you learn only apply within that specific game.
It's almost like a dead end.
Exactly.
That's a shame because mastering a skill is it's so rewarding.
Right.
That's one of the things that makes a game really compelling.
Totally.
What a shame to have all that effort just disappear when you're done with the game.
And there's another interesting consequence of this throwaway model that they point out. They call it the YouTube effect, which is the idea that for a lot of these shorter games, you can pretty much get the entire experience just by watching somebody else play it
Oh, yeah.
online.
Makes sense.
You know, why bother buying the bag of chips when you can just watch someone else eat them?
Right.
Makes you wonder how developers can create games that are, you know, compelling enough to break through that passive consumption.
Yep.
And they argue that framework-driven design is a big part of that.
Okay.
Because games built on these dynamic systems, they're just inherently more unpredictable and surprising.
Right.
Which means they're more replayable and they're more interesting to watch.
Yeah, so it's not just about making better games. It's about like creating a new way of experiencing them.
Exactly. And Reactorcore even connects this back to the issue of mastery.
Okay.
They argue that in a framework-driven game, the skills you develop could actually be transferable, you know, to other aspects of the game. Or even to other games built on the same framework.
That's a cool concept.
Yeah.
It's like instead of learning a specific set of moves for one dance, you're learning the fundamental principles of dance that you can apply to any style.
Exactly.
I can see how that would really motivate players to invest the time to master a game.
Totally.
Yeah. And it's not just about games either.
Right.
This idea has implications for learning in general.
Absolutely.
Imagine if educational games could teach transferable skills
Yeah.
that you could actually use in the real world.
That'd be amazing.
Okay, so how would this framework-driven design work?
Sure.
Could you give me some concrete examples?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's take character creation, for example.
Okay.
Instead of offering a limited set of pre-made characters, you could create a modular system. It's kind of like a digital Mr. Potato Head.
I like that.
Where players can mix and match different body types, facial features, clothing options.
Right.
To build their own unique characters.
And it's not just about the aesthetics either, right?
Yeah.
No.
Like those choices could have an actual impact on the gameplay.
Of course.
Maybe certain body types are better suited for certain roles.
Right.
Or maybe specific clothing items provide different benefits.
Exactly. Every choice has meaning and consequence within the system.
Right.
And that depth of possibility, it just encourages replayability.
Yeah, you're constantly making decisions that shape your experience.
Right.
Rather than just going through the motions.
Yeah, and that ties back to maximizing the value you get from your content. You know, you're not just creating more stuff.
Right.
You're creating smarter content.
Yeah.
That can be recombined in endless ways.
And that makes it really appealing for smaller developers.
Basically.
Because you don't need a massive budget or a huge team to create a game that feels vast and expansive.
You're right.
Like Reactorcore gives some great examples of how even a small amount of content, if it's cleverly combined, can provide hours of gameplay.
Right.
The magic lies in the way it's structured and presented.
Not just the sheer quantity.
It's not about throwing more stuff at the player.
Right.
It's about crafting systems that encourage experimentation and discovery.
Yeah.
And this emergent gameplay that we've been talking about.
That even applies to level design, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Instead of having a linear series of levels, you could design an open world where levels can be played in any order. Or even rearrange themselves with each playthrough.
Exactly. It's about breaking away from that rigid structure.
Right.
And embracing something more dynamic and fluid.
Yeah. And this isn't just a hypothetical idea.
No.
There are games out there that are already doing this.
Totally.
It's like they're giving us a glimpse into the future of gaming.
Yeah.
A future where we're not just consuming prepackaged experiences.
Right.
But actively participating in their creation.
And I, for one, am excited to see where that leads.
Yeah.
It's a future where games aren't just about entertainment, but about empowering players and creating a deeper connection with the medium.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the theory behind this framework-driven design.
Yeah.
But let's bring it down to earth a little bit.
Okay.
What types of games do you think could benefit from this approach?
I think any genre could benefit to some degree.
Okay.
But it's especially well-suited for games that already emphasize creativity and exploration.
Yeah.
You know, emergent gameplay. Think about sandbox games like Minecraft or Terraria.
Right.
Where players are given the tools. And then they're just set loose to build whatever they can imagine.
Those are great examples.
Yeah.
Like, the fun isn't about completing objectives.
Right.
It's about the act of creation itself.
Exactly.
And even in strategy games like Civilization or Sin City, the challenge is about managing these complex systems,
Right.
and responding to these unexpected situations.
Yeah.
They already have those emergent elements built in.
Uh-huh.
Imagine if those games took it even further, gave players even more control over the variables within the system.
Totally.
Or what about RPGs?
Yeah,
Character customization and branching storylines are already like key elements there.
for sure.
Imagine an RPG where your choices don't just affect the narrative,
Right.
but they actually shape the game world itself.
Exactly.
The possibilities are really exciting.
Yeah.
Of course, I can imagine some players might resist this approach a little bit
Oh, yeah.
because there's a certain comfort in knowing what to expect,
Yeah.
and having a clear objective and a defined path to follow.
Yeah, I get that.
Not everyone wants to be thrown into the deep end,
Right.
but it's important to recognize that this opens up this whole spectrum of possibilities,
Right.
games that embrace uncertainty, that reward experimentation,
Mm-hmm.
and really invite players to step outside their comfort zone
Totally.
and truly play.
Yeah, and these are the types of games that could have a real impact on
Sure.
society
Okay.
because they teach valuable skills.
Right.
Like critical thinking, problem solving, adaptability.
It's almost like training for the real world, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we can learn to embrace the unexpected in a virtual space,
Right.
maybe we'll be better equipped to handle it in real life.
That's a great point.
It speaks to the power of games to go beyond just entertainment.
Absolutely.
They can challenge us.
Mm-hmm.
They can make us think differently.
Yeah.
And they can help us grow.
So Reactorcore has laid out this vision of a future
Yeah.
where games are more than just throwaway experiences.
Right.
But how do we actually get there?
That's the question.
You know what needs to change in the gaming industry to make this vision a reality?
It's a big question.
Yeah, it starts with a shift in mindset,
Okay.
both from developers and players.
Mm-hmm.
Developers need to be willing to take risks,
Right.
to experiment,
Yeah.
to embrace new ways of thinking about game design.
And players need to be more open to trying new things,
Right.
stepping outside of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And supporting those developers who are pushing the boundaries.
Exactly.
So it's about expanding our definition of what a game can be and recognizing that it can be a tool for learning,
Yeah.
for self-expression,
For sure.
even for social change.
I think so.
So we need to change not just the games themselves,
Right.
but the whole culture surrounding them.
It's about breaking down those old stereotypes
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing the true potential of games
Yeah.
as a medium.
What stands out to you from what we've talked about so far?
What's really resonating with me is this idea that games can be so much more than just a way to kill time. They can be powerful tools for personal growth and for social change, and that's a very exciting thought.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm feeling inspired not just to play games differently,
Yeah,
but to think about the world differently.
that's great.
Okay, let's get back to Reactorcore's article for a minute.
Sure.
They offer some concrete solutions for how to move forward.
Okay.
And they start with a pretty bold statement. They say small throwaway games are not the future. They argue that as larger, more expansive games
Right.
that offer greater value and longevity, as those become more common,
Yeah.
these smaller disposable experiences,
Right.
they're just going to become obsolete.
Yeah. It just makes more sense from a resource standpoint.
And they connect this back to the issue of mastery.
Uh-huh.
It's hard to invest in mastering a game
Right.
that offers just a fleeting experience.
Exactly.
And they also point out that it's often enough to just watch someone else play a throwaway game.
Yeah.
To feel like you've experienced it yourself.
That's like you've already had your fill of chips just by watching someone else polish off the bat.
Right. So this presents a real challenge for game developers.
Yeah.
How do you create games that are not only fun to play,
Right.
but also compelling to watch? Games that offer a unique experience that you can't fully capture in a YouTube video or a Twitch stream.
Right.
Games that demand active participation
Yeah.
and make you want to experience them for yourself.
And this is where framework-driven design can offer a solution.
Okay.
Because games built on these dynamic systems, they're inherently more unpredictable.
Right.
They're constantly evolving,
Mm-hmm.
offering new challenges and possibilities for exploration,
Yeah.
which keeps them engaging to play and fascinating to watch.
Think about it. Watching someone play a game where you have no idea what will happen next
Right.
is a lot more compelling than watching someone play a game where you can already predict the outcome.
It's like the difference between watching a scripted reality show
Oh, yeah.
and a live sporting event.
Right.
One is predictable and manufactured.
Yeah.
The other is spontaneous and unpredictable.
And that unpredictability is what makes those live events so captivating.
Right.
You're on the edge of your seat wondering what's going to happen next.
So Reactorcore is essentially arguing that games need to become more like live events, more dynamic, more unpredictable, more engaging.
And they believe that framework-driven design is the key to making that happen.
Yeah.
Because it allows for a level of emergence and player agency that just isn't possible with that traditional linear design.
Right.
So this isn't just about making better games.
Yeah.
It's about creating a new way of experiencing games.
And that's a very exciting prospect.
Yeah.
It opens up a world of possibilities for
Around.
how games can connect us and challenge us and inspire us.
Okay, one final point I want to touch on before we move on
Sure.
is Reactorcore's argument that this throwaway game model, it's actually bad for the gaming industry overall.
Yeah.
Not just creatively, but financially as well.
They make a really good point about the economic unsustainability of that model.
Yeah.
You know, these games often take years to develop,
Right.
but they have a very short lifespan.
Yeah.
Players consume the content quickly
Right.
and then move on to the next thing.
It's like fast fashion, but for games.
Yeah.
Constantly churning out new products that are designed to be quickly consumed and discarded.
Right, and that creates this pressure on developers
Yeah.
to constantly produce new content just to keep up with the trends
Yeah.
and to compete for attention in this really crowded market.
Which can lead to burnout,
Yeah.
to crunch, to a lot of other negative consequences for the developer.
And it can stifle innovation.
Right.
You know, when you're so focused on producing these short-term hits,
Yeah.
you're less likely to take risks,
Right.
to experiment with new ideas, to really push the boundaries of what's possible.
So they're saying this throwaway model is actually holding back the gaming industry,
Yeah,
both creatively and financially.
exactly.
And they believe that shifting to this more sustainable, framework-driven model could actually benefit everyone,
Totally.
developers,
Readers.
the industry as a whole.
It's a win-win-win scenario.
Right.
But it requires a pretty fundamental shift in thinking. You know, we need to be willing to move away from the old way of doing things and embrace this new vision for the future of games.
So Reactorcore's call to action is all about challenging us to imagine a world where games are seen as more than just disposable entertainment.
Yeah.
They want games to be recognized as powerful tools for learning, for creativity.
Your self-expression.
They're asking us to envision a world where games empower players,
Yeah.
challenge them, inspire them to make a difference.
And that's a vision worth striving for.
Yeah.
You know, it's a vision that could transform not just the gaming industry, but our society as a whole.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
But this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Right. Reactorcore is giving us a lot to think about and discuss. But now it's up to us to take these ideas and run with them.
Yeah, we need to challenge our assumptions.
Right.
And imagine new possibilities for what games can be.
And most importantly, we need to put these ideas into action to create games that reflect this vision. You know, games that empower players, that challenge the status quo,
Yeah.
that inspire us to think differently about the world.
In the next part of this deep dive,
Okay.
we'll explore some specific strategies for breaking free from this throwaway mentality
Right.
and embracing this framework-driven approach to game design.
Sounds good.
We'll look at examples of games that are already doing this.
Okay.
And we'll discuss some practical steps that you,
Yeah.
as a game developer or a player,
Right.
can take to help make this vision a reality.
So stick with us as we dive even deeper into this fascinating topic.
Okay, so we've talked about the problem with these throwaway games and the potential of framework-driven design. Now, how about we get practical?
Okay.
Reactorcore offers some advice to developers looking to, break free from this old way of thinking. And they start by addressing that movie mindset,
Right.
that tendency to approach game design almost like you're writing a screenplay,
Right.
where you're focusing on this predetermined sequence of events instead of systems that support, emergent gameplay.
Right, yeah.
They give this really great example of designing a forest level.
Okay.
So the traditional way to do it would be to, craft every single detail.
Yeah.
Every tree, every rock, every little detail.
Yeah, I get that.
But Reactorcore suggests a different way.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on those individual elements, you think about the systems that create a forest. Like, what are the conditions that would allow trees to grow.
Right.
What kinds of creatures would live in that environment?
That's a good point.
It's about shifting your focus from the specific to the general, from individual elements to the principles that govern them.
I see.
And this could be a real challenge, I imagine, for developers used to this linear, detail-oriented way of working.
Yeah, for sure.
It's less like painting a picture and more like writing a recipe. You're providing the ingredients and instructions, but the player does the actual, cooking.
I get you.
And that could be a little scary for some developers.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're giving up some control.
Right.
You're not dictating exactly what the player is going to experience.
But that's also, that's where the magic happens, right?
It sounds like it opens up a world of possibilities for, truly unexpected and emergent gameplay.
Totally. And that's what makes games truly engaging, when
Yeah.
players feel like they're discovering something new, something that the developers didn't explicitly design.
Right.
That's when they get hooked.
So Reactorcore talks about using these Eiffels statements
Yeah.
and a bit of randomness to create these emergent systems.
Right.
And they argue that even simple systems can produce incredibly complex and surprising results.
Like in a game like Dwarf Fortress, for example, the world is generated procedurally,
Right.
based on rules and algorithms.
Yeah.
The developers didn't design every single mountain or river or cave.
Right.
They created a system that generates those features
Yeah.
based on a few parameters.
And the result is a world that just feels vast and complex, full of surprises,
Totally.
unexpected challenges.
And that's the beauty of framework-driven design, You're not just creating a game.
Right.
You're creating a whole world. A world with its own internal logic and its own rules and its own potential for, emergence and evolution.
But this approach is about more than just world building, right?
Absolutely.
Reactorcore suggests that you can apply it to, every aspect of game design. Character creation, combat systems, even storytelling.
Yeah, they use the analogy of a modular building system
Okay.
where you have these basic components that can be combined in endless ways to create a variety of structures.
So instead of designing prefabricated characters, you create a system that allows players to mix and match different attributes, skills, abilities.
Yeah, and those choices would have real consequences in the game world.
Right, yeah.
Maybe certain skills make you better at certain tasks, or certain attributes open up different dialogue options or paths you can take. Yeah, it's really cool.
And the same principle could apply to combat systems.
Right.
Instead of a fixed set of moves, you create a system where players can combine different attacks, defenses, special abilities.
To create their own unique fighting style.
Right.
It's about giving players the freedom to experiment, to find their own solutions,
Yeah.
And to really create their own unique play style.
And this idea of modularity, you can even extend it to storytelling.
Oh, for sure.
Instead of a linear narrative, you create a system where the story unfolds based on the player's choices.
Yeah.
Their actions.
And games like The Witcher 3, where your choices throughout the game impact the ending, are a good example of that.
Yeah.
Or a game like Disco Elysium,
Right.
where your dialogue choices not only shape the narrative, but also reveal your character's personality and their backstory.
So framework-driven design isn't about abandoning storytelling.
No, not at all.
It's about finding new and creative ways to tell stories that are more dynamic and personalized.
And more engaging.
Right. And that's what's so exciting about this shift in thinking.
Yeah.
It's not just about making better games.
No.
It's about creating a whole new medium for storytelling and creative expression.
Right.
It's about tapping into the true potential of games to not just entertain, but to challenge us, to make us think differently about the world, to inspire us to create our own stories.
And that brings us back to Reactorcore's call to action. They challenge us to imagine a world where games are seen as more than just disposable entertainment.
Right.
They envision a world where games are recognized as these powerful tools for learning, for creativity, for self-expression.
And they remind us that it's not just up to developers to make this happen.
Right.
It's up to all of us as players to, demand more from the games we play, to support the developers who are pushing the boundaries, to embrace this new era of gaming.
And the future of gaming is out there. It's waiting to be discovered.
So the next time you pick up a game, ask yourself,
Okay.
Is this just a throwaway experience? Or is this a game that's going to stick with me?
Right.
Will it challenge
Will
me?
it inspire you?
Yeah, inspire me. Will it make me think differently about the world?
And if the answer is no, maybe it's time to seek out those games that break the mold.
Yeah.
The games that are embracing this framework-driven approach and keep exploring, keep playing, and keep challenging those boundaries of what games can be.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah, I agree.